And actually, talking about widows, do you know in our church we don't usually think about the widows?
Okay.
When we're in church, they tell us this. They say the singles, the other side.
In those marriage and courtship.
Yeah, those that are married, almost getting married, the other side. The marrieds.
Whoa.
Have you ever heard of the widows?
The widows we have. In the days when the judges ruled Israel, there was a great famine in the land of Bethlehem. Come think of it. Bethlehem, the house of bread, has run out of bread. It's a conundrum. And desperate times need desperate measures. A man flees with his family to the land of their avowed enemies, Moab. It's gonna be hot. I am Benjamin Habasa, and this is The Microscope, a program where we take a closer and deeper look at biblical events and characters, and in the end realize that these are not mere stories. Welcome once again, dear viewer of The Microscope. This is yet another episode, and a special one, in that I have a special guest in studio by the names of DOREEN TENDO. A lady in the studio means we are having a lady's perspective to things, and it should come as no shock that we are discussing today a female Bible character. There are very few Bible characters of the female gender in the Bible who have become so prominent to become household names. Whenever we think of the Bible, we think of names like Abraham, we think of Moses, and ladies right across our minds except Mary, the mother of Jesus. And yet, among the ladies who have made their own names and well-deserved is Esther and Ruth, to have even Bible books named after them. Today we deal with Ruth and the book that her name represents. Ruth comes after Judges. And so at the time when the judges are ruling Israel, the book of Judges gives us a wide view of the affairs of the nation, government and governance and wars and persecutions, and then Israel rises again, collapses. But the book of Ruth comes and narrows us down to the story of a family, of a household and individuals. From the struggles of the nation become the struggles of individuals. I believe that is going to be very important because it is individuals watching the microscope, not nations. What is the general picture that comes to your mind when you see and read and hear of Ruth?
When I read about Ruth, actually me as a person, I read the book about the book of Ruth because my mother is called Ruth. So I picked interest to go on and find out what is so special about my mother and this character in the Bible.
Wow.
Yes. So I wanted to find out in depth what Ruth is all about. And what I liked most is, apart from all the Hebrew names that we find in the Bible, Ruth is still an English name.
Okay.
So it was not translated. However, we realized that she was a Moabite. She was not a Hebrew. We know that the story of Naomi with his family. Naomi was a Hebrew woman, and Ruth was not. But even the way Ruth finds herself in the general picture of the story, it's really interesting. So I had to really go deep and find out how did these two, the Moabite and these are Hebrew, again. But it's believed Ruth must have been R-A-A-H.
Isn't that God is somehow, somewhere?
Of course, since the Moabite, they might have been a god.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's Ruth. Yes. And how do we get to Ruth? Because in the beginning chapters, we see Naomi and her family. Actually, Naomi means sweetness.
Okay.
Sweetness. And
she's such a sweet character.
She's such a sweet character. That is one of the things that really, triggered me to read in depth and find out of it. It means sweetness.
Wow.
And
this is interesting. Scholars say that a Hebrew man used to pray a prayer of thanksgiving and saying, Lord, I thank you that I am not three things.
Okay.
That I am not a Gentile, number one. That I am not a slave, and that I am not a woman.
And I'm not a woman.
And Ruth seems to be all the three.
Exactly.
And makes it to be one of the most prominent characters of the Bible that we look up to. And I think this book holds more hope than we estimate.
It seems. We're just beginning, but by the end of this show, probably our viewers will have an insight of how good and exciting and spiritual building this book is.
Powerful. In fact, it's one of the books which have a little commentary about it. In fact, people see less God in it. In fact, for example, when I was checking around,
they did a love story, of course. Most thing, if you talk about truth, what comes into the mind? That's a love story.
A love story. But it's way beyond that.
It's way beyond. We shall go on.
And it teaches us to begin with that love stories shouldn't just be love stories.
Shouldn't
even our own love stories.
Yes.
Should be
These were the beginning.
Wow. This is great. The Bible starts by telling us in Ruth chapter 1, verse 1, that now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land. The Bible does not specifically say at which period in the reign of the around 14 judges or 13 who judged Israel, and which judge it was.
That was a period of 13 to 105 BC.
Okay.
That's the period that book was written.
1305 BC.
Yes, 1300 to 100 to 1050, sorry, BC.
Oh, in fact, when I was also checking the one historian, a prominent one, Flavius Josephus, he being a Jew, of course, and a historian, a chronicler, he says this book, in other words, the judge specifically of Israel in the days of this famine and the setting of Ruth was the judge Eli. Eli known for having notorious sons and who brought wrath upon Israel. So it makes some bit of sense that in the days when the judge was evil, the people also were evil, and the famine ended up.
And actually, since that time, there had not been a famine.
Okay.
Since the Israelites moved to Canaan, there had not been a famine.
Wow.
So that is the time the famine started.
Oh.
So we look at there must be, because if there had not been a famine, so something might have gone wrong here.
Didn't they have promises of God?
They had quite a number of promises, because we see that these Israelites had not been famine since the time, ever since Ruth was.
Well, since they settled in
Ever
Canaan.
since they settled in Canaan, there had never been a famine. And you wonder why, what happened?
Okay.
Because actually, according to the commentaries, we see that it was not caused by war. It was just drought. Because remember, even when later on when Ruth goes back, there's nothing that shows that it was
That
brought
is
by
war, or that they are producers being plundered by nations.
Exactly.
So natural.
It was a
disaster.
natural drought. So you wonder, it's God's nation. Why would it happen? Wouldn't you wonder? Yes. Wouldn't you wonder as well? What happened?
Wow.
But now, according to Deuteronomy 28, verse 15, it reads, "But it shall come to pass, if you do not obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all his commandments and his statutes and his statuses, which I command you today, that all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. Cursed shall you be in the city, and cursed shall you be in the country. Cursed shall you be, cursed shall you be your basket and your kneading bowl. Cursed shall you be the fruit of your body and the produce of your land, the increase of your cattle and the offspring of your flocks."
Okay.
You see here?
That's the curse upon the farm.
That's the curse upon the farm.
And in brief, basically a drought, of course.
That
When the
God-
land and the farms are cursed.
Yes, when they curse, so what do you expect?
And this is the people who, before they settled in Canaan, God had given them indeed very many marvelous promises. For example, he says to them specifically, in Deuteronomy chapter 11 and verse 1, he says, "But the land whither ye go to possess it is a land of hills and valleys, and he drinketh water of the rain of heaven." This is a promise by God himself that he waters the land.
The land.
He tells them in another place that the land where you go are going to possess is not like Egypt, where you would sow your seed and water it with your foot, like you come back with the watering can to water on foot. The water itself comes from heaven out of God. So it was a promise of the Lord's providence over the rain, and that nothing would ever fail in its season. And this even becomes more prominent when you consider the place where they dwelt. Bethlehem.
Bethlehem. You get so, and because though in Bethlehem, and there's something when you talk about promises, there's something that comes into my mind. Is that God Himself says the commandments. Well, God promises, but what comes into my mind at times when we don't obey God's commandments, the repercussions.
All promises are with conditions.
With conditions.
Man does his part, and God does his
And
part.
God does His part.
I've never read anywhere where God failed on his part.
Yeah, but
It's
He has
always
never.
part.
It's always us always followed up, and we think God will still keep His promises despite our
We're not
disobedience.
keeping our part.
Oh, exactly.
Wow. So Bethlehem means the house of bread.
The house of bread.
Or from Beth meaning house, and Lahim meaning bread. And this is the least place you'd expect
You would
to
expect
lack
me
bread.
to like.
In fact, one commentator says this is a person who had walked through Bethlehem, describes it as a place where the valleys below, in the commentator's own words, are exceptionally fertile and have been so from time immemorial. Hence, indeed, the name Bethlehem, a bread house. Its modern name is Bethlehem, or flesh house. Now, flesh is meat, and that's a place with both bread and meat. You know, both crops and animals flourish there. So, a famine should be out of the picture seriously.
Yes, and us who go into geography know that usually valleys are not usually fertile.
Okay.
Yes.
Valleys are not fertile.
Valleys, no.
I would expect the reverse.
No. Valleys,
yeah.
because of the, the Ori valleys, the Ori mountains on the side. So that water that runs from the mountains usually washes away all that soil.
Okay.
So it usually leaves the valleys less fertile.
Oh.
Yes, because of that water and then the sand and that heap.
Okay. So the fertility is always in the plains.
Exactly, like on the slope. Okay, but valleys are never fertile.
So Bethlehem actually being fertile is again a miracle because
It's a miracle.
its fertility is from God.
So it just know it's exceptionally fertile.
Wow. When the famine was in Bethlehem of Judah, of course, a man and his wife and two sons. Thus, the Bible introduces them to us. Verse 2 says the name of the man was Elimelech, as he said to us. The name of the wife Naomi. His sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephratites. You say it again, the names of the sons mean?
Then when we look at Mahlon, it means sickness, sickly.
Okay.
Probably that is why he even died.
He was a sickly child.
That is the meaning of the name. Yeah. And then now we see Chilion means paining.
Okay.
Yeah,
or
so that
or complaining, and doesn't sound like a happy family.
It doesn't. It didn't really. So apart from Naomi and the father, yes, the sweetness and the Elimelech. God is my God is king.
Is king. Wow. So I am getting a mental picture. Something is forming in my head. There is a man called Elimelech.
Yes.
God is my king in the days of the judges, especially now, of course, in the days of Eli towards Samuel. The people of Israel were starting to get those monarchical sentiments, starting to want a king like the nations round about them. And a parent names his child, God is my king.
God is my king.
He's basically trying to say, I'm not in your things.
I'm not.
Get me out of your things. For me, God is my king. And now this sounds like a very godly family. And marries a woman named Sweetness or Pleasantness.
But end up calling their children sickness, sickly.
It seems these children coming to the picture may have kind of, can I say, spoiled the peace a little. Like this godly man and this sweet woman. Now they give birth to sickly and pining children. And then to make matters worse, a famine comes in the land.
Exactly. And what happened when after the famine, Naomi, as women, we always think very fast. And you see anything that happens in the family, they either blame or appraise
the woman. If it's good, we applaud the man.
If it's good, they appraise the man, yeah. So if it's bad, it's the woman to be blamed. So she thinks very fast. Let us go to the neighbors, to the neighboring country.
Yeah, let's get refugee status and get out of here.
What I wonder is, why of all countries, why did she opt for
Moab?
For Moab.
Wow, that's interesting. I remember I was talking to one woman long ago. I and this woman were backbiting another woman whose sickly child she had taken to a local healer. Those who heal with some who get herbs and speak words into them and tie them on the hem of the garment and pronounce healing. So this woman told me, you see, I'm a Christian, I'm a church deacon.
Church deacon?
No, the woman I was talking to. She says, what this woman did of taking her child to that African chemist.
African chemist.
I don't condemn. I don't support, but I don't condemn, because I know what it means to be a mother of a sick child. You can't do anything. Like literally, your motherly instincts will lead you to desperate measures. So even if they had gone to Egypt or Moab or to hell, I would understand the plight of a mother of sickly children who are facing hunger.
So we should not, you're saying we should not hurry to judge
Exactly.
Naomi
To
for
crucify
taking
her for her-
for taking her
for her
family
decisions.
to Moab, because we see Moab was a country that
There was food.
there was food, but it was not. They used not to worship our God. They used to worship the small gods. It's a country, I should say, that was deserted. They didn't know anything about God. They didn't. These are people who are just living their own kind of
But they
life.
were open enemies. They had
Open
been
enemies.
oppressors of Israel at some points before.
Now, when of course we don't blame Naomi so much, but really wonder why, of all countries, that is where she decided to flee to seek refuge. Because now, when you open in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 3,
Okay.
we read and see, it says, "An Ammonite and Moabite shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. Even to the 10th generation, none of his descendants shall enter the assembly of the Lord forever. Because they did not meet you with bread and water on the road when you came out of Egypt. And because they hired against you Balaam the son of Beor from Pathor and Mesopotamia to curse you."
Wow.
So you hear about
So Moabites are actually an abomination.
exactly. And now the best example I can give is maybe if we are enemies with Congo, and that's just, you see, the rebels, and God forbid anything happens in Uganda, and we think about, okay, drought, famine comes in Uganda, and the first place we think to flee to is Congo.
Wow.
So
There are many things you keep saying which give me a million thoughts. Sometimes, now this is one of the things that we seek to do here on the microscope. When we see a biblical character, we are not apologists to come and defend them and say, whatever this person did was good, I am standing with them. And neither are we there to judge and condemn them and say, this one is bad. Like, we show them the reality of what they are. They have both the bad and the good. And sometimes these children of Israel, I get issues with them. I think once or twice they take matters perhaps a bit too far. When God says that an Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even to the 10th generation. Now, that's some long time, but shows something definite about it up to the 10th generation. Why? Because by the 10th generation, the seed and the traits of the parents are likely to be over, and the new generation may have come in, which is now admissible into the congregation.
those are like 3 generations.
Yeah, like by 3 generations something is happening, but 10 generations are many. But nevertheless, that's what God has given. Now, let me give you something to think about.
Okay.
In the book of Ezra, okay, let me start with Nehemiah, chapter 13.
Okay.
We find a scenario where Nehemiah comes back from Persia and comes to Jerusalem, and he finds that the children of Israel have intermarried with Moabites and Ammonites. He says in Nehemiah chapter 13 and verse 1, he says, "On that day they read in the book of Moses in the audience of the people, and therein was found written that the Ammonite and the Moabite should not come into the congregation of God forever." That's what you have just read, like that bit in the book of Moses.
Yes.
So they read that verse you have read. Verse 2 gives the reason also, because they met not the children of Israel with bread and with water, but hired Balaam against them, that he should curse them. How be it? Our God turned the curse into a blessing.
Into a blessing.
Now, Nehemiah was a contemporary of Ezra. They lived in the same years. But by the time we come to Ezra, now Ezra verse 7, Ezra chapter 7, I want us to say how many generations had passed by then, but the beef was still on. Ezra chapter 7 and verse 1. I want you to count for me the generations. Because from Moses to Nehemiah is equal to from Aaron to Ezra. Moses lived with Aaron, and Ezra lived with Nehemiah. So it says in verse 1, now after these things, in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, Ezra, the son of Seraiah, that's one generation, the son of Azariah,
that is second,
the son of Hilkiah,
third,
the son of Shalom,
fourth,
the son of Zadok,
fifth,
the son of Ahitub, the
sixth,
son of Amariah,
seventh,
the son of Azariah,
ninth,
the son of Meraioth, the son of Zerahiah,
10,
the son of Uzi,
11,
the son of Buki,
12,
the son of Abishua,
13,
the son of Phinehas,
14,
the son of Eliezer,
15,
the son of Aaron, the chief priest.
16.
Up to 16 generation, they were still having this terrible beef against the Moabites. In fact, some scholars also, they crucify Ezra for being too harsh and it to be a family breaker. He told them to divorce completely. Whether the children were bad or good, whether marriages had turned into worshippers of God, he said, away, 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 and go away. So sometimes in our bid to follow God's command, to not be unequally yoked with believers, I think sometimes we go an extra mile. And we be too unequally yoked that we become useless to them.
You're right.
And I think it would be profitable to give a counsel to our viewer on how to
on how to go,
how to not be so distant and end up being useless to the world around us, and that and much more after the break.
Okay.
Akasanyu oba nnaku.
Amaka kusalawo okwo, ssanyu bw'olisalawo, nnaku bw'osalawo.
Amaka gakwata ku lwamu buno n'obugenda okujja.
In fact, amaka ly'eggulu ettono ery'oku nsi. Naye oyinza otya okwewala obubi n'ennaku abangi bye bayitamu?
Puroguramu Amaka tulambulula ensonga ze tusanga mu maka. Oyagala essanyu mu maka go, onoonya mubeezi, oyinza otya okuza abaana b'otazaala, n'ebirala bingi mu puroguramu Amaka buli Saturday ssaawa 3 ez'ekiro ne Wednesday ssaawa 10 ez'emisana wano ku 3ABN TV Uganda.
Viewers, welcome you back from that short break. So we'll resume. We stopped when Naomi has gone into Moab, and they finally settled there. We discussed and talked about how probably of all countries, Moab was not the best, but they settled there. And the fact this country was not good, And what shows that it was not the best for them, even though when they'd just gone, Elimelech died. Elimelech passed on. And I think that is one of the signs God was showing them that it was not an ideal decision that she took. It is not one thing that she would have done. What do you think? Sometimes I think if he had remained behind, wouldn't he have died?
You remind me of. But this is so serious. In that, in this world we are living in, it is always hard to pin a cause to an effect.
Exactly.
In other words, it's not that all people who die it's because they have sinned.
Because they have sinned.
Otherwise, all of us would be dead. Only
Would
Jesus
be
would be
dead.
alive.
Would be alive. Yeah. Okay,
So,
putting that aside, because when we look at chapter 1, and that is in the second verse, it shows us that he died, and so Naomi remained with only two sons. The ones we talked about, Mahlon and Shildon. But remember the meaning. One is sickly, and then Shildon is
pining.
pining. So we go on and see. And guess what?
Doesn't verse 4 tell us that they dwelled for about 10 years? So now after the death of the husband, Naomi lived with these sons for 10 years. Wow.
Yeah. But of course the time they got married, because Ashumi might have died when they're still
youngish
to the time when they got married. And so they got married.
Perhaps as a consolation. I remember in Genesis the Bible says that Isaac, when he married Rebecca, Rebecca comforted him after the death of the mother. So as God says, it's not good for a man to be alone. Perhaps these men being alone after the father is gone, and the mother is now also starting to get old and need more care. Perhaps getting some women may have been
the best
thing to do. But would they have to now first walk back to Israel to find women?
They got married, but why didn't they go back to Israel? Because according to Deuteronomy 7, it's just that, at least we know that gone there for refuge. But we expect them to go back to Israel and get married there. Because I read for you 7.
Deuteronomy 7.
Deuteronomy 7.
Okay.
It says, when the Lord your God brings you into the land which you go to possess, and has cast many nations before you, the Hittites and the Gishites and the Amorites, Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than you. And when the Lord your God delivers them over to you, you shall conquer them and utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them, nor show mercy to them, nor shall you make marriages with them. You shall not give your daughters to their son, nor take their daughter for your son.
Okay. So wait a bit. What's the reason in verse 4? Is God just also having a beef with them?
For they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. So the anger of the Lord will be aroused against you and destroy you suddenly.
Okay. So God's deal in all of this is to prevent his people from being lured into serving other gods. Like, God does not hate Moabites, literally. He just hates their system of worship,
the gods
they serve, and fears they may induce the children of Israel just through intermarriages. And here you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that this is a huge threat. We have before us
a risk.
Exactly, a case of Solomon, whom Nehemiah says that a man is beloved by God and most wise. So if he himself was led astray by outlandish women, how about you, no more cassava eaters?
And Naomi, and you know, women, some kind of... Okay, but literally, apart from seeking refuge, they go on to marry those Moabites. And it also brings a question that do you think they still worshipped the God of Israel? All because Moab had small gods.
Yes. Wow, this is that's an interesting question, to which I think.
But we shall, I think, get answer. We shall get the answer as we go on.
Wow, there is something called PCM.
Public Campus Ministries.
No, please. Preach, convert, and marry. In other words, if you can't find the love of your life inside God's church, go out there and hang
And preach.
And when you get one, pump them with Bible studies. If they seem inclined to the Word of God,
Then you marry.
baptize them. Don't marry them before baptizing them. That's a key element. Baptize them, convert them, baptize them, and then marry them.
And marry them.
Like just bring them to church now to make it official. Now that thing is risky.
It's risky. But actually, they didn't even preach. Did they? The Bible has not talked about them preaching.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But some people, this PCM thing has worked for them. Like some people have literally married unbelievers, and the people have started believing. And they are not part of the body of Jesus, and they are preaching the gospel.
It's I should say 50, but I wouldn't advise the listeners to take that risk. Just like you said, it's a risk, because this person may not have converted fully. And in case of anything, you've seen people that in case of any argument, in case of any problems at home, he will say, after all, I'm even going to leave your religion. You get, I'm going to, so they'll attach the religion. Yes, they will attach the religion to this, to their partner. They'll think it's their religion. But this person who has converted religiously, and so this person will not have, cannot easily really
So God does not
turn away
expect
from
of us to obey Him by disobeying. In other words, to transgress His explicit counsel to not marry unbelievers, to do that for the sake of preaching to them. You can't obey by disobeying God. And one of the things which makes me think that perhaps these people may have been converted to the worship of God. I find it in chapter 1 where we are, and then when we go downwards to where we shall reach later, to the parting words of Naomi. She says to these daughters-in-law of hers, and she says to them in verse 15.
Verse 15.
And she says,
we should read verse to 15. Okay.
It's okay. And she said, behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people, and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. When she says has gone back to her gods, is meaning there had been kind of a deserting of her gods. Now she has gone back to them. So I can somehow commend these boys, Cleon and Baron, their
they did. No. Yes. Actually, I wanted to bring it later on. We didn't want to. But since you talked about it, and so we see that is the reason as to why Ruth got stuck to them. And we acknowledge Naomi as well in this chapter, that you see that despite the fact that she went to a country that was believing in small gods, she still kept on believing the God of Israel. She didn't desert her God. You see, because otherwise they would see no difference between
her and them.
Yes, they would.
Attractive.
She wouldn't have told Oprah that, go back to your gods, which means their God was different from Oprah's God. Yes. So, yeah. So that is like.
So in a short time, Naomi left with the two sons.
But he left with the two sons. They get married to Ruth, and that is where we start seeing Ruth, the character of Ruth.
Okay.
Ruth and Orpah. And of course we are still wondering how could they get married to these two. But the good thing is, despite their marriages, they still taught them how to believe in God. And you know what Orpah? Orpah means stubborn.
Okay.
Orpah. That's what it means. And
why do these people misbehave like their names?
So that is, and others think it's frown, you know, like people.
Okay.
That is what others interpret it.
Okay.
And I wonder the time she was with Naomi, she really didn't exhibit those characters of being stubborn, but she went on to believe Naomi is good. But the unfortunate part here is the sons passed on. They died. Now Shilion, and Mahlon died. That's a tragedy. Because just imagine you flee from famine. Your husband dies. Your two sons die.
That's worse than famine.
Exactly. It's
now
worse
3
than
widows
famine.
in the same house.
3
Who would
widows.
comfort the other? Maybe the senior widow would
The
comfort
senior
junior
widow.
widows.
No, of course now, leave alone being a widow. But even the fact that she's a mother, it's because these ones at least are not mothers, so they may not know how hurting. And because we, just like we said we read in chapter 15, the verse 15, she told them to go back, which means they were still young. They would get they would get other men to marry them. They were young, so they still had. They would be put on the shelf. But now, Naomi, probably she had aged. You've lost the sons. Could you say she was in her menopause? She would not give birth again. Okay, but she was a widow, so that is a double. Like
that's the worst state of affairs.
These are the worst. Because at least if the sons were there, she would get comfort. The sons were married, she would have grandchildren. That would.
But even in this situation they are in, famine may even come back. I mean, they may suffer hunger again. The men are gone.
The men. But now the famine was not hurting like
the loss.
Like the loss.
This double loss, if not the triple loss that happens to Naomi, is summarized by one scholar in the following words. Though written in some olden English, but they are yet the more even powerful. She says, "Poor woman. Of the two sexes," says Fuller, "the woman is the weaker. Of the women, old women are the most feeble. Of old women, widows are the most doleful. Of widows, those that are poor, their plight is most pitiful. Of poor widows, those who have no children, their case is the most doleful. Of widows that have no children, those that once had them and after lost them, their estate is the most desolate. Of widows that have had children and lost them, those that are strangers in a foreign country, their condition is the most comfortless. Yet all these made themselves together in Naomi, a widow who is has no children."
Let's start from that. She's a foreigner.
Yes.
She had children but lost them. But she once had children.
Yes.
She's a widow.
She's old.
She's old.
And she's poor.
She's poor.
And everything. So I think this is, as another one has said, of all men in the Bible, Job has suffered the most. And of all women, Naomi takes the trophy for the most sufferer. I can never think of a woman in the Bible who suffered the way Naomi suffered. And yet you have to remember in all this, let's not be like Job's friends who pin suffering to sin. Naomi's suffering all this is not an indication that she was the worst of sinners that could be found on the face of the planet. The Bible says the Almighty does not afflict willingly. He does not just come and throw affliction. In all this, we can even tell this before we go very far. The Lord is working out a greater plan. Not just for Naomi, but for the whole planet. Through the sufferings of Naomi, we thank God. We are the beneficiaries.
And still what I want to air out to the listeners, that some of these stories teach us, because in our daily lives, putting in applicability, that those days, women, I'll speak on behalf of women because I'm a woman, women really suffer, really go through a lot. And you know, a lot, what is a lot to me may not be a lot to someone else.
Oh, yes.
You get. What means a lot to someone or less to someone may be a lot to the other. But what lessons do we learn from Naomi? You get. Let us see that, let us know that something has happened before. The viewer out there, this not the you're not the first person to go through all those hard things you're going through. Here we have talked about it. Probably you've not gone as far as Naomi's, you know, the extent Naomi went to. You're suffering, but you're in your country, you're in your, you get, you're in Uganda, where you can call someone you know that, you know what, help me with this. You still have your children. You've not go as far as Naomi suffered. Probably you still, okay, you've lost your husband, but there's some relatives around that you can always, so it's a lesson.
Let me also speak on behalf of men
to
balance the equation. Because I'm a man. The Bible says whether we live, we don't live to ourselves, and whether we die, we also don't die to ourselves. Who do we die for? Those that are left. In other words, many times I'm on the road, I'm a road user. I rarely use air. I have to go from place to place. And men make decisions on the road that make you cringe. A person comes with a motorcycle and goes and sees a truck and calculates his milliseconds in his head and swerves in front of the truck, and you're like, young man, you don't love your life. But the biggest issue that happens after a person dies, the deceased does not suffer. Like the unconscious in the grave. Who suffers the most? Their loved ones. That's for me the biggest reason I fear death. For the sake of my beloved that will stay around. I'm not crucifying again Elimelech and the sons that they died and they are the cause of their suffering. I am sure they didn't want to die. But in our daily decisions, let's remember, if you're a man, widowhood is bad. Don't ever let your woman have to go through that.
Reckless. And actually, research has it that the reason as to why, okay, apart from sin, why men die more in more numbers than women, because they engage themselves in risky jobs, risky kind of things. You find they're trying to prove something. So
they think they have contracts and peace agreements with death.
So just like you said, they should think about the people they're leaving behind.
Wow. Naomi is not just a role model for women. She's even a role model for widows.
For widows, in particular. Yes. And actually, talking about widows, do you know in our church we don't usually think about the widows?
Okay.
When we're in church, they tell us this. They say the singles, the other side.
In those marriage and courtship.
Yeah, those that are married, almost getting married, the other side. The marrieds.
Whoa.
Have you ever heard of the widows?
The widows, we have a class for you.
Have they ever talked about them?
No. The widows, the single parents, the divorced, the separated. Those classes are really highly segregated.
They've never.
I think that was also the case in the early church, because I remember Paul gives counsels concerning widows. He says widows are those that are widows indeed. A woman of 60 years and above, that one is a widow, and should be a beneficiary of the church's fund for aid. If a widow is young, let them go and remarry. No wonder Paul himself gives counsels on how to treat widows, because the church may have been handling this case very carelessly, like we sometimes do. 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 3, Paul says, honor widows that are widows indeed, like widows deserve their own species of honor. He says in verse 4, but if any widow have children or nephews, let them learn first to show piety at home and to requite their parents, for that is good and acceptable before God. And now the children have, including nephews and nieces, have a big duty towards their widowed parents and aunties. He says in verse 5, now she that is a widow indeed and desolate trusteth in God, and continueth in supplications and prayers day and night. That was a widow indeed, who prays day and night and continues in the Lord. In verse 6, but she that liveth in pleasure is dead while she liveth. So if a widow after being widowed becomes a happenier and does not pay attention to the situation, that one is a dead one. Leave her alone. But this is the last verse, which says in verse 5.
Okay, but you will repeat verse 3.
Okay.
You first go on, first complete and...
Wonderful.
If I think that is verse 4.
Yes, I will go to verse 5. Let me go to verse 9 actually, let me skip. It says, let not a widow be taken into the number under 60 years old, that is 60, having been a wife of one man, well reported of for good works, if she have brought up children, if she have lodged up strangers, if she have washed the saints' feet, if she have relieved the afflicted, if she have diligently followed every good work. In other words, a widow who deserves honor is the widow who have brought up children, even if they are not hers, who has lodged strangers, who has shown hospitality, who has washed the saints' feet, in other words, who has taken care of the ministers of God, who has relieved the afflicted, and followed after every good work. One who does not do after this is dead while living. But widows after this manner deserve respect. Did you say we return to verse 4?
Verse, because I think that counsel we should, I want the widows out there. That must have been verse 4. The widows out there. It's a good counsel to them, so maybe we can really stress it out to them. That was verse 4?
Yes.
Asking 4. Them to pray and...
Yes, it says, that is verse 5. It says, now she that is a widow indeed and desolate trusteth in God.
Yes.
And continueth in supplications and prayers day and night. Amen.
Amen. So that is the counsel I can tell to the widows out there. Because and even those that are not widows, you just don't know when and that may happen. But just God forbid, just in case that happens.
It does not happen to sinners. It happens to everyone.
It happens to everyone. It does not. It's not only sinners.
Right.
And actually, here in John chapter 9.
John chapter 9.
Yes. When it says, now Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned? This man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but the work of God should be revealed in him.
That's a complete Naomi. We see the work of God revealed in her completely.
Exactly. So we can't say that she had sinned, but it's the work of God that was being revealed in her.
So anyway, listening to the microscope right now, there is a perfect promise of God in the book of Isaiah chapter 54 and verse 5. For thy maker is thine husband, the Lord of hosts is his name, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel, the God of the whole earth, shall he be called. There is none desolate who trusts in God and continues in prayer and supplication. The maker of the whole world and heaven is your husband. How it ends up with Naomi and the rest, and how it affects me and you in the next episode on Microscope. Until then, may God bless you.
God bless you too.